Perfect. Well, thank you very much for joining me, guys, for today's roundtable event. Today, we're going to be discussing, does remote work actually improve productivity of engineering teams? So myself, Graeme, I work over here at Amicus. I actually recruit exclusively for Golang across Germany, and I'm joined today by three wonderful guests. I'll make some quick introductions. I'm joined by Javad Amiri. He's engineering manager currently with Delivery Hero. He's led numerous teams across his career, and he's also served previously as a CTO, so he's got some fantastic experience. I'm sure he'll add some great value. Patrick Burden, he's currently working with PPRO as the engineering manager over there, leading quite a large team. He's also functioned as technical and people lead for several companies across several teams, whilst also founding his own company a little while back, where he also functioned as kind of CTO. Finally, last but not least, also joined by the brilliant Atul. He served as engineering leader, engineering manager, recently founded his own company, and he's managed countless teams across his illustrious career. So that's some brief sort of introductions. So first of all, obviously, thank you for kind of joining me, guys. First sort of topic I'd like to discuss really about whether or not working remotely actually does improve productivity is again surrounding performance and productivity. So the first question I've got, I'll start with Patrick, but of course kind of go around each of you, Patrick, Atul, and then Javad lastly. How would you ensure that remote employees kind of can stay focused?
Well, how I usually try to keep people focused is having like time allotments for focus for deep work times versus less focused times. Actually encourage breaks to have more focused time and not have this extended expectation for focus, because you can't really hold your optimal focus for 8 hours. So I really try and push for more deep work times where people can put as much attention and focus as they can into shorter time periods with intermittent breaks, rather than just trying to have focus be a consistent thing. You can only remain at that high performance and high focus for a short amount of times, and really trying to optimize that rather than, you know, just trying this extremely high expectation of high focus for 8 hours. And then when you have on call, that then bleeds into that, and it causes problems when you have this expectation for no breaks and no focus and a pure focus all the time, and really try and balance that out. I try to have teams have calendars that are open so that people can see when people are taking coffee breaks, when people will actually be available for shared work as well and shared focus. So I think it's not about having all the time focus, but really certain times of high focus. And you can see that with having calls that people are joining and working on. You can have like active work times that you can check in with people, message people, work with them in that way, versus just this high expectation of constant focus. Like in a regular work environment, like in an office, people tend to take breaks, they go to the bathroom, they do things rather than just being focused for 8 hours a day. And I try to replicate that in my remote work teams.
Okay, cool. So maybe kind of lower the expectation for kind of being 100% all day and kind of replicate that realistic sort of environment. Yeah, Atul, have you found something similar in kind of your experience?
So I think, first of all, thank you for arranging this session and inviting me. And it's good to meet the panel here. It's really wonderful to have into the discussion and talk about such issues which usually as a leader we deal with. And as far as this specific question is concerned, and I think there are a few things which comes to my mind as a leader. One is like when we talk about our team or the engineers focus, I think the first thing which comes to me is like, have you defined the team vision? How aligned are the folks, and how much onboarded are on they with the team vision? So as a leader, I think first job for me is to define the team vision, and this team vision typically is different from the company vision, because we are kind of dividing or breaking the problem at a very sub layer. And I think once the folks are onboarded, I think the next step for the people alignment is working around the task which fits the skill and the experience in the team. So identify the right balance, have everybody onboarded, and work on a plan which I typically call as like a bottoms-up plan. It's like not as a leader ask people to do A, B, C, D. Let's hear from the folks how they want to drive the execution of a targeted goal. And I think once everybody is onboarded and aligned, then I think as a leader, my task become easy.
Okay, brilliant. So I think similar kind of having that kind of replication, or maybe in office scenario, but again having that kind of trusting that engineers kind of will find the best approach. Yeah. Okay, Javad, I'd love to hear from you. So we've had a mix of kind of having that replication of in office sort of scenario, but again, kind of having that trust that engineers can kind of complete the tasks that are important to them. But what have you found across your experience?
Okay, thanks a lot. I'm also very happy to be in this meeting and discussion. So based on my experience, actually, first of all, about the focus of the teams when working remotely, what comes to my mind is more or less about we can increase the focus and also the productivity if we try to make a time-bounded, let's say, meetings or events, because when people are working from home, there are so many distractions that come around. Maybe I don't know, their partners, or just trying to talk because they're in home. It's happening all in many places that I'm just working with many guys that I see. But I would say that having a plan ahead for the day, maybe, or because I'm going to a more granular scale. I'm talking about a day in the life of a remote worker, right? If you have some meetings that is scheduled, then they can know that, okay, from this time to this time I have the meeting, so I should be much more focused, so they can arrange it beforehand. And it may help a lot for being focused on that specific time, rather than just, you should be always focused. It's not possible, I think, from working from or it's very hard working from home to always being focused, but making it in a smaller sessions that you can focus, it may help. It's actually for a team communication. On the other hand, for a focus that is an individual focus, I would say it's very dependent on the some personal traits as well, which maybe we can go further if needed.
Yeah, definitely. I think that kind of leads quite nicely into my next question, really. So you mentioned kind of being quite granular in your approach to kind of approaching your day. That kind of leads to my next question, really, and I'll refer back to you, Javad, please. How would you address certain challenges that may kind of arise surrounding accountability or maybe completing those tasks?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I would say I will refer to what Atul said about the values of the team that you have set. First, if you set the values and when you build a culture of trust and foster a culture of trust, then afterwards you can expect that it will give you back. You can make sure that for most of the time it will work and people can be accountable. One thing that is very important, just diverging a little bit from this specific discussion, is that for building the trust, you need to meet in person. Sometimes, not always. At least if you are managing a fully remote team and you're starting with that, definitely as a manager or leader, you should have a session with them in person, or maybe even regularly. I don't want to go to the hybrid model of working that says very regularly, but sometimes meeting helps to keep that culture of trust more healthy. After that, I think then you can expect that people also will pay off. On the other hand, there are many factors that you can also take care of. For instance, defining defining task in a very good way. So well-defined tasks, everything should be clear. So you should know that it's very hard to communicate over the details if you're working remotely with lots of back and forth. So it's much better that you have many well-defined tasks. This also will help, and as I said, combining this with trust can pay you back.
Okay, so I see again, kind of building that idea of the team sort of trusting you. I suppose it's probably quite a bit easier to kind of build that in person, as you were suggesting. Just want to go back to Atul for a moment. How would you actually suggest to kind of build that trust alongside, of course, meeting people in person?
So I think, since we are talking about the remote, see, one thing is very important to understand that, we cannot eliminate the human touch factor, correct? So even though, we have been either on a basis of a situation forced into a remote mode, or because of, the skills which we are not able to attract locally, we are operating remote. So we have to understand that the human touch is not going away. We cannot really, find an alternative to it. So which means that, we have to find some mechanisms where we can cover for it, where we can, find alternatives, where, we can get to meet to the people. So which means like, arranging some periodic touch-up meetings in a headquarter or in a local offices. That's one thing come to my mind. Second thing is, the very popular, thing which is getting very popular these days is a virtual meet, virtual coffee or virtual social events. So, I mean, we can get into those virtual social events. But the third thing, which is also very important is we often assign the task, which is like, one-to-one, to the engineers. But, why not, assign the task, which is for, certain group of people? And it develops a camaraderie among the people, and they also learn how to work in a team. So assign a task which is, maybe involving 2 to 3 people, and have them come up with, the execution plan, the release plan, or maybe a knowledge sharing session plan. So what would happen eventually, we would see is that, people are coming close to each other. They are understanding, they are aligning with the frequency. And this will enhance, the trust as well as improve the productivity.
Okay, so I suppose it'd be like a twofold effect, really. Obviously, as the trust will increase, the productivity will increase. Kind of brings me kind of full circle, I suppose, to the point that Patrick made originally, sort of approaching the day maybe in small bursts. Kind of links to my next point quite nicely in terms of kind of having that work-life balance. Say, for example, you're working in maybe a small squad. I'm curious, Patrick, how would you actually go about protecting individuals from feeling obligated to be sort of permanently available, sort of when working in teams, I suppose?
Yeah, so that's why I encourage like on-call systems, so that if it's after hours that you're on-call available and you're paid for the on-call time versus just expecting to always be thinking about work and just waiting for a message or something to really start working when you're not supposed to. And so you can distribute that obligation and expectation to be available to certain individuals at certain times, and you also give them time off from that, and really trying to like time box a work day that you set working hours starting at say like 9 and then ending at 8 in your local time, and you let people kind of pick some time if they need extra time off in the day that they aren't billing for. You have that time marked in their calendar as well, and you kind of time box the time that people will be working, and you have people work 8 hours within that time. And once they're out of their regular work time, their daily allotted hours, you expect them not to be there, and that the on-call people will receive those requests and that work need, and they will work on that. And so it's really, just distribution of responsibilities at the end of the day, and really setting these expectations of when people will be available, what they'll be available to do, and then sticking to that as a manager and not stepping over those bounds and reaching out to people who aren't expected to be available. And if you notice people from other teams are doing that, you go and talk to those other teams, tell them to stop doing this, talk with their managers, and really get these expectations agreed to across the company.
Okay, so you would kind of actively encourage setting quite hard boundaries, I suppose, between obviously your work life and kind of personal life. Okay, I'm wondering, just curious, would that have maybe like an adverse effect on productivity, to having quite hard boundaries, and maybe the day isn't quite as fluid? Or I'm kind of keen to hear your thoughts there.
So I think that there can be some issues for some people there, but I think over time it really balances out when you have everyone operating in these manners, that it evens out. People know what they can expect and what they can't expect, and they don't push for more than is part of this expectation, and you build this into your timelines. I know it can be rough to kind of switch into that type of culture for a lot of people, as well as like being on a team where you're expected to be reached out constantly. It can be tough to do that change, and knowing that a lot of people also overwork, and that's something that people get joy out of doing this work. But at the end of the day, if you are always expected to be working and available, you don't get to relax and refresh yourself for the next workday, and you will slowly wear yourself out. And this is what is a major cause for burnout, is people always have this high expectation of work. And so you may be able to get more work out of someone in a short time period, but then they're going to burn out. And then that's really it for working with them. It's not going to produce the long-term results that you really need and what you're really looking for as a manager, because you're not trying to plan 1 month or 2 months, you're trying to plan years. And if you really want to hit year-long targets, you can't use your people until they no longer work, because then you have to go through these cycles of onboarding and retraining people every time someone burns out. And you can't rely on your workers in the same way, because they are always at a higher risk of burning out and not being able to focus and not being able to really be present, because they've been present for 3 months straight. And that just takes a whole toll on the human psyche.
Right, I see. Okay, yeah, thank you for kind of breaking that down. Okay, I'm curious, have either of you guys, Atul or Javad, had similar sort of experiences in kind of managing burnout amongst your teams?
So I can go there. So I think, as Patrick said, I think it's very important that we define what is expected out of the engineers. That's very, very critical. The second aspect which can come handy is, have some limited processes for your team. And let people contribute, like the team members contribute defining those processes, and review with the team. It's not just that, at the beginning of a year, you have defined the processes, this is how you would operate. But I think you should constantly review those processes, change them. Today the people would be comfortable working, say 9 to 5. Tomorrow they may say, 10 to 6. And then, the equation which you want to follow for certain kind of tasks, say on call, correct? Say on call is like, very, I would say, tricky situation. Particularly, if you are woken up in the night and you are not prepared for it. So there are certain instances where you have to prepare the employees, say, the customer engagement, customer queries, customer calls, on call. So there are situation based for which you have to prepare the folks, align them, and then define the processes for them. So I think it's very important, have the specific solution for the specific problem.
Okay, so yeah, can get touching base sort of as and when sort of things sort of naturally evolve, I suppose. And finally, Javad, in terms of your experience with this issue of burnout, and what ways have you kind of maybe managed it, I suppose?
Yeah, I think most of the topics Patrick and Atul already talked about. Just again, going to a daily scale, I want to say it's possible that usually I ask my teammates to let the other people in their team know when they're going to do working, and when they are done with the work, and will not reply to anything. So it's already known that in what time who is available, and in what time there's no responsibility. They are not responsible for responding. Even it's not a hard and fast rule that, okay, if you said that I am now available, then you should always reply to us like messages in, I don't know, 5 minutes or 2 minutes or something. I think it's also possible that you update your Slack status and say, okay, I have an emergency or not. I need to do something. I'm running out of groceries, going out, we'll be back. And so it's more or less about the communication between the team. And as I said, with a plan that you will stick to it for most of the times, because always exceptions happen. For most of the times, we can maximize the productivity, and as far as we can prevent the burnout.
Okay, brilliant. That kind of leads me actually quite nicely onto another question I had. I'll bring it to you again, Javad. In terms of communication, I'm curious, when people are maybe available or unavailable, have those clear boundaries, how would you ensure that people have quite efficient kind of knowledge sharing among the team? Say, for example, if one person is unavailable for a period of time, yeah, how would you ensure that knowledge sharing takes place sort of efficiently?
Um, About the knowledge sharing, I think when the teams go for working remotely and adopt that style of working, then the habits of working should change. One of them was knowledge sharing. When you are sitting in office together, then you can reach out to people and ask questions. Then there are lots of the project knowledge or the system knowledge that you are working on. There are tacit knowledge. I mean, people know about them, but they don't uh, feel the urgency for writing it somewhere down. So there's always somebody that you can reach out and ask. But when going remotely, it's very, very harder to, because of all of the things that we already mentioned, right? People may not be available. There might be distractions or anything. So one of the key points to keep in mind here is that we should go more for documentation. I would say, though in the software teams, usually people go for agile methods and they say, okay, we should not do that much documentation. But I would say working remotely again demands it. We should write more. The knowledge should be written somewhere and in the access of be accessible for all of the team members that are going to collaborate on the project.
Okay, so maybe switching the methods in which you would obviously work as opposed to working sort of in office. Kind of building on that then, sort of increasing the documentation, for example. I'm curious, Patrick or Atul, I'm curious to hear what other methods have you guys sort of introduced into your teams for ensuring that that knowledge sharing takes place effectively?
Yeah, so one of the things I try to do is have teams with very low bust factors and no single source of failure. So really trying to avoid having one person that knows something. If there's only one person that understands this, you quickly try and have them document it, teach it, and spread that knowledge. So if they're unavailable for a day, work in that area doesn't just stop. I also really encourage teams to have various channels that they ask questions in and the whole team can answer. So it's not just on like Jira or something where something's documented in one location. It's also in where people are talking and having these public conversations that serve over time as this other type of documentation where it's exact questions for exact problems and exact solutions. And you can go through these channels after the fact and see what other people have asked, what other people don't understand, check your understandings, and learn and grow as a team that way rather than what I've seen in person is often much more one-on-ones, like teaching and learning and knowledge sharing. You have this opportunity for much more group sharing. And so everything is shared with the group versus just in one-on-ones. And it really helps like magnify how many people know all the information that you need. And that also then prevents the single source of failure, which I think is a severe problem in a lot of tech teams I've seen where there's really one lead or one principal engineer who really knows all of that. And then they end up spending a lot of time just teaching others in one-on-ones and not really being as maximally productive as they can be. And by changing how they share information, you end up having more people learn faster and actually producing the results that people want to be producing.
Okay, wonderful. So kind of keeping things open, more of like a group setting, I suppose. I appreciate probably Atul, you've had a similar experience yourself.
Yes, I think Patrick and Javed has already covered most of the points here. The another dimension, which I want to add here is like, as a leader, you should lead by example by sharing as much as information with the team. I mean, see, it's not only about the product which we are building, but there are many things which is happening on the organization. And when, as a leader, when you sit in the staff meeting or, an executive meeting, you get a lot of information. And when you share with the team, you are basically setting up a practice that, it's good to tell to the people, not about the work, what they are dealing with, but what actually is happening all across. And it set up a culture where, people think like, they should also share the knowledge what they have. That's one aspect. Second thing, which comes to my mind, and it's that, it's very popular, is like, it's always good to over communicate. And so communicate. There is nothing called, a bad communication, less communication, or over communication. I encourage people to share knowledge, encourage people to communicate as much as possible.
Okay, so kind of encouraging sort of more communication. Communication obviously kind of leads to better results. Okay, I'm interested then. Obviously in the office, it's quite easy to kind of lean over to your colleague and have a quick chat with them. How would you actually go around sort of improving maybe that engagement or team spirit amongst a distributed team? And this is open to anybody, by the way. So yeah, anyone who has any ideas here, I'd be curious to kind of hear your thoughts.
I can go. So I think, one of the aspect, which is very important to understand here is like, when we say big organization, so many teams, and you want to ensure that, people share information, that means we are eventually targeting to improve the communication in the organization. And one of the aspect here is to create an excitement in the people. And how do you create an excitement with the people is like, you know what? There is another division which is working on this funky idea. Would you like to learn about it? Would you like to reach out to the people? And you are also carrying, this exceptional knowledge. Why don't you go ahead and share with the people? But this is, this should not be just limited to the work. I mean, if somebody has, an exceptional skill, or somebody did an adventure on a weekend, I mean, share with the folks. Like, I went for, say, paragliding. Somebody says, I did some skiing or whatnot, I mean, so, we have to develop this culture where we should not just limit it to the work, but there are so many things which happen in our life, good and bad. We should always be open to exchange our thoughts, ideas, suffering, pain, and, the good thing which is happening in our life. And these things are very important, because eventually we want to build a strong culture in the company where we feel that we have a trusted partners who are there not just to help us solve the problem, help us debug the issues, but also who are friends for life.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Patrick. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I definitely agree with that. I think software development is a lot about communication. It's communication in between individuals and communication to the machines that then execute the operations. And it's really just about sharing as much information as you can. And there's some people that talk about like really targeted information or information channels that are for specific topics. And I can agree with part of that, but at the end of the day, the goal is more communication. And if these channeling and siloing of information is reducing that, it's not really working out. And I also really agree with sharing things about personal lives and actually building that human element through that. And that then fosters more trust, because you know what people are going through, what people's lives are like. And that simulates part of this like in-office environment where you are around each other and you can kind of learn those things. And I really encourage teams to have little chit chat sessions right at the beginning of meetings, at the end of meetings, other times during the week that are planned, and sometimes even not, because this is really what builds this camaraderie that produces results. When people just feel like they're cogs in a machine and they're not people and they're just there to write code, you will not see the results that you really need. People will be less encouraged to communicate with each other. They won't like understand how people receive information, and you can't really build cultures that move forward together. People end up isolating, and then keeping them in the company becomes extremely hard because there's nothing keeping them there beyond a paycheck. And that eventually just stops really working.
Okay, I suppose obviously building that team spirit, that team culture, and that camaraderie you mentioned will obviously kind of lead to obviously improve retention, etc., among the team, and again, kind of productivity. And Java, as you mentioned previously, you think it's quite important to kind of be in person at least sort of now and then, and to kind of build that trust. I'm wondering, touching on the subject of team spirit and engagement and things, do you believe maybe working remotely can simulate the sort of camaraderie and team spirit you'd find in an office? Or I'm kind of keen to hear kind of your thoughts on this.
I would say that Atul already mentioned that nothing can replace it, face-to-face relationship, right, with your friends, with your colleagues. So yeah, definitely, it's like that. We should say if we go and if we decide to go for remote working, then how we can try to balance and how we can try to at least come close to let's say coming to the office. Sometimes making a balance works makes much more sense because some people in the home when they're working in home are more productive, but at the same time just gets frustrated even if they're productive. So as I said, yeah, from time to time meeting each other, not necessarily for working. Company can help the teammates meet each other, go for dinner, sometimes go for playing, I don't know, some sport, doing some sports outside the work hours, maybe some budgets for team events that are not necessarily work related, just for spending time together. This will help a lot to make the teams better and with more spirit for working. I think these are the techniques that the companies can use to foster the better communication and also the help of teamness between people.
Okay, so it would be kind of the company's responsibility to help foster this environment, sort of company-wide, and not just sort of within specific teams. Okay, then. So I'm kind of wondering, in terms of obviously kind of meeting up and kind of developing more socially amongst your team, how would you actually foster opportunities for engineers to maybe kind of develop on a more professional level? Say it's a fully remote distributed team, for example. And yeah, kind of back to you, Javad, on this one.
In this regard, I think more or less it can be seen as any other task that's as a leader or any other responsibility that you as a leader have toward your team. So you can define plans, let it be that they want to follow the plans remotely or on site. Then it would be definitely talking with them. First of all, knowing their interests as well, where they are heading, where they want to, where they see themselves in 1 year, in 2 years, and maybe in 5 years later, what they have in mind for themselves, for their future. So trying to align it with the sometimes companies' goals, because it's not always that we want to follow just for the sake of the company's goal, but it should be aligned with what people want. So after aligning, just regularly checking, providing them some examples, connecting. So this, I would say, it's a mixture of all of the things that we talked about. If they want to progress in their career, if they want to develop their skills, then they definitely need communication. There are people on the team that can help them, so they need communication. And there are situations that we should follow and see if their plan are on the track or not. Then, so I think a mixture of everything that we are talking about comes to play for helping them grow in their career.
Okay, so it would be a combination of obviously everything we've kind of discussed already. And I'm curious, Atul, do you feel that working kind of on a fully remote basis may have an impact upon a team's sort of satisfaction, maybe in the work they're doing?
See, the way I think, and my opinion can be a little different here. And the way I think is like offices are not going anywhere. Correct? Offices has its own advantages. And we have seen it work for so many years. I think it will continue to work. We have to find a right model for our hybrid mix or a pure remote thing. But then it will take some time. It's something which is very industry specific, your office specific, your people specific. So you have to work with your team, like what's the right combination, and your hiring depends on that. Your people should influence that. You should take inputs and you should change it. You should be open to change it. If today you start in a pure remote culture, then and tomorrow you feel like it's not working out and you're not seeing the productivity, or your customers are not happy, you should be open for a change. So there is no one right answer here, that the remote is good, or maybe the office only is good. But I think the right combination is important, and that's what we all have to work together, having everybody onboarded onto that decision making.
Okay, again, you kind of allude to having that team spirit of everybody kind of getting involved in the decision making. Okay, Patrick, and kind of down to you to this one. One of the things I kind of encounter quite a lot among engineers more recently, kind of since more and more people going into the office, is again what I mentioned before, that kind of satisfaction of the kind of work you're doing. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are in terms of having that blend between maybe in the office or kind of remote. Yeah, what are the key things you've done to improve, obviously, the kind of satisfaction in the work that engineers are doing?
Yeah, I try to often have like retros that really check in on the progress that people have made so that they can really see the advancements that they've done as a team and feel the satisfaction in reaching goals and achieving what they're set out to do, and showing that versus expected timelines. So if teams are delivering early, to definitely check in and show that they are making this progress, they are doing what they've set out to do, and that they should feel that sense of accomplishment over this. I think a lot of this sense of satisfaction is about like seeking meaning through work and the value that they provide, not just to themselves from like a paycheck, but to society or to something that they care about, and really focusing on that and showing that they're actually doing this. And that's where I think satisfaction really for most people comes from. I think that the remote environment versus in-office environment satisfaction is, at least for me, it wasn't that much different. There wasn't this additional real satisfaction layer from being in the office. There was this additional layer of like interacting with people that much more often, that was really nice, but it didn't really provide satisfaction. It was this different feeling. So I think that it's very still similar to the in-office environment with how you drive satisfaction.
Okay, interesting. Thank you for making the distinction between the two there. That kind of leads me to one of the more key points I was hoping to get out of today. One of the points that actually often get overlooked, because quite often we look at things from a purely sort of productivity standpoint. Now back to you again, Patrick. One of the key things that kind of key questions I face on a daily basis, I'm keen to kind of hear your thoughts on. What can kind of leaders do or engineering managers do to really support the kind of mental health and kind of well-being of engineers in their team?
Yeah, so I think one of those is definitely, as I talked about before, having boundaries with the workplace. I think that's a way to really destroy your mental health, is if you don't have those boundaries and you're constantly under pressure. That will cause so much stress and it will burn you out. I think also encouraging workplaces to have budgets for people's well-being, so either mental health support, gyms, sporting activities, things like that, to really encourage people to take care of themselves and have the company foster and support that. And also, again, by leading by example and talking about my own struggles if I have them, as well as what I've learned through my life that has really helped me through struggling points, and really talking about this and having mental health and well-being being something that people actively talk about and try and support each other through. And it's a little bit different in a remote environment because there's not that physical connection type thing that's there where you're actually in the same space. But I think that the analog is close enough that you can really still do that if you talk about it enough, you make it present in people's minds that this is something you care about as a manager, as a team, and as a company, and you really push this forward, that with the well-being of the people is seen as the well-being of the company, and the only way to have the goals be met is by having people be well and really having that be a priority.
Okay, brilliant. So sort of, again, kind of what you mentioned kind of previously, setting up those boundaries and kind of having that open communication is something that you kind of mentioned is quite key. Now, Atul, kind of, yeah, you've mentioned similar already, but in terms of, yeah, kind of supporting the mental health and well-being of your engineers, what kind of things maybe do you put in place to sort of, yeah, uphold those standards?
So first thing which comes to my mind is the tools, the infrastructure. Let not the people get frustrated by their speakers, mic, monitor, chair table, and the basic things, the infrastructure part of it. That means you should ensure that team has access to the right tools. And then the other thing is listen to the people, about their development plan, what are their aspirations are. I think it's very important. Yes, we always talk about, the work, the productivity, how are we getting there, what they are supposed to do. But I think it's very important to hear from the people is about their aspirations and prepare the development plan accordingly. So this can actually, to a larger extent, mitigate a factor that somebody is pushing into something which I don't want to do. And it should actually inherently come from people like, this is the thing which I want to do, I am good at, and this is how I can be better at doing it if my manager provides me these tools. So I think it's very important to create an environment where you are providing those tools to the people.
Okay, brilliant. Sorry, Patrick. Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
I was going to say, if I can add in onto that, I definitely agree with that. I think adding into that, like building tooling within your system is also important, and building designs of your system in ways that are simple enough to not become overly complicated, that this developer experience matters. What is it like to actually write code and to think about the problem and deploy your code and all that, and how difficult that is, how many struggles are there, frustrations if it keeps breaking, and really focusing on resolving those so that the developer experience is nice. Like it should not be a hassle to do your job. And if you can build a system and you have the right actual raw materials like desks and headphones and all that work for the people, then it's a much better experience, and people will enjoy that more, and they will stay around longer, and they will actually be more productive.
Okay, brilliant. I'm kind of, yeah, that obviously kind of links back to obviously overall kind of engagement too. One of the key things I picked up on from what Atul was saying is having that that progression plan maybe in place, kind of sticking to that, kind of boost obviously your engagement, etc. That kind of links back to kind of what Javad was saying earlier in terms of having that progression plan in place, and how maybe it doesn't differ too much from being in the office or indeed remote. Now, I'm just curious, Javad, your thoughts in terms of that having that structured progression. How much would that maybe impact a person's sort of mental health and kind of well-being?
I think it's very important. You, as a human being, you should feel that you are progressing. If you feel that today just passed and I did nothing, and it's even worse than yesterday, or it's like I'm like yesterday and I didn't achieve anything, it's a really bad feeling, right? And if it happens every day and every day, then you think that you are just a tool that are helping other people progress. And yeah, you get your payments and salary at the end of the month, but you're a ladder that other people just go up through you. Then you should feel, okay, if I'm working here as a developer or as a team member, first of all, I should develop my human communications, human relationships with my friends. I should have fun. This is part of my being as well. So it's not just about the skills. This is also about the human relations, my mental health. And secondly comes the professional skills. Then I should feel that I am learning something new. I am helping my team and I am helping my company to achieve its goals. But on the other hand, I'm also progressing by learning new skills. Then I'm expanding my skills and I have more power. Let's be honest, you know what's happening in the tech with laying off. Many of these things that's happening, so they should feel secure that they know something, that if anything happen, there's a hope that they can again continue. Yeah, I think it's quite clear what I'm talking about. They shouldn't be afraid that, okay, I'm just staying on the same stage every day. I'm not moving forward, and what happens if I lose this job or anything happens in the market? So I think this is very important.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely sense the overall theme here of having that kind of security in your work, but also I think as mentioned previous, doing your job shouldn't be a hassle. It should be something that obviously you enjoy. The final question, really, something that kind of comes up to me almost on a daily basis from engineers that may be looking for something new and kind of want to leave a remote environment, is maybe they haven't been noticed when they are kind of suffering kind of from burnout or kind of struggling. Now, I'm curious, maybe this is open to Atul again, how would you actually go around maybe identifying or spotting an individual that's kind of suffering from burnout, for example?
Well, some of the things depends on the the metrics which or the observation which you make, the loss of productivity, or it's impacting the health of the engineer. They are overstretching. They are not like more vocal or contributing in the team meetings, like even in the stand-ups, or they are very brief or to the point. They're not like just opening up. They are like restricting information to them. There are so many parameters there, correct? And I think that's where the one-on-ones which we have with the engineers become very important. I know you have figured out these things in the team meeting in a bigger groups, but I think one-on-one is that one, I would say, engagement with the engineers where you have to be very thorough as a leader. You have to have a very specific plan. You have to understand what's happening, what's the personal problem, what are the work-related problem, and what suggestions, as a leader, you can make to have that engineer get out of that area, get out of that space, become comfortable again, become more productive again. So I think you have to be more sensitive here. Social element is involved here. And I think it's all about psychology. You just have to think like, you're not treating somebody as your subordinate or someone who is working for you, but I think more as a a brother or a sister, or maybe your child. How you interact with your kids. You have to bring those elements here and make them comfortable again.
Yeah, I suppose it's probably something that's quite difficult to teach, having those soft skills for sure. Now, Patrick, that links me back to kind of what you were saying previously, kind of having that kind of structured, those structured boundaries potentially. So I'm curious, what other advice would you have for maybe remote workers to establish like a healthy daily habits or daily routines?
Yeah, I think that figuring out your own personal like rhythms with work is a key part there, so that you are working within your personal rhythms. Like often people right after lunch will be like less energetic, they'll have less focus, and really trying to plan work days around that so that you have certain focus times, you have different meeting times, you have more general availability times that you're open to being like diverted into other tasks, working with another team or supporting teammates, and really charting as much of this out on your calendar daily as you can. And then ideally you get into like a weekly cycle so that people can understand what your rhythms will be and work within those rhythms and respect the boundaries easier when they understand how this will work. And if you chart this out like on a calendar, they can see it on the calendar, and they will, like, this is my experience, that people will respond to that, and they'll respond to that positively and engage with how your rhythms work best, because that's what they see is how they get the most from you as well as to give the most to you. And that relating to people in this way is better than just forcing people to some arbitrary standard, and letting people come up to these and organically figure out how to work together and foster that communication and that co-working as much as you can. I think that's really key.
Brilliant. I think you've actually summed up the whole conversation quite nicely in that kind of final sentence there. Kind of final thoughts from you, Javad, in terms of kind of what I mentioned previously, those kind of daily tips. I know working remotely is something I personally don't really enjoy. So what kind of tips would you have for kind of improving maybe your daily rhythm or daily routine when working remotely?
Personally, I would say I really like, if I'm working remotely, I really like to communicate with my team. That's I have something to do in between the time that I'm working. For instance, I may say that I go for a walk sometimes just to get some fresh air and come back. I may say that yeah, there are many things that I might be interested in doing. It's already good to communicate and let the other people do. So the thing is that even I may go in the middle of working. I set some time and go for gym and do some exercises and come back. So again, I would emphasize here that it's not. I'm not saying that exception doesn't happen. Yeah, all of us know that there are exceptional cases, but we can come with a plan, something like this that help us enjoy even working remotely. Because if you go to office, definitely you don't have much time. It's very hard to say, okay, now guys, bye. I want to go to gym and I will take a shower and then come back and continue. But working from home is okay. I go to gym, coming back, taking a shower, and I will continue, and I may get much more productive even.
Okay, brilliant. So maybe having that increased sort of flexibility in your life, definitely something that I could maybe strive for. But okay, I think personally, at least, I think we've covered pretty much all the questions that at least I face from maybe hiring managers or kind of engineers looking for the next role. So that was everything that I was kind of hoping to cover personally. But just before we kind of wrap up, do you guys have any additional thoughts that maybe something I've missed, for example? Seems to be that we've covered pretty much everything, to be fair. Well, okay, guys. Kind of lastly, of course, thank you very much for kind of joining me here today. Of course, the full recording will be available over on LinkedIn. I'll post that very shortly, so you can keep an eye out for that. Also be available on the Amicus YouTube channel. But guys, it's been a real pleasure kind of speaking with you. The value that you guys have added, maybe something that comes quite obvious to you guys in terms of the engineers that kind of watch this kind of roundtable discussion today. I'm sure there'll be some real helpful advice, real helpful sort of value that you guys have came up with. So lastly, thanks again for kind of joining me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for having
Thank you.
us.
Thanks for having us.
Perfect.
Bye-bye.
You have a good weekend, guys. Catch you all later.
You as well.